Have you ever heard of Constantine XI Palaialogos? He was the last emperor of the Roman Empire. Well, sort of. To be more precise, he was the last emperor of the Byzantines, which was technically still the Roman Empire. So why was he the last emperor? Well, in a way, it was kinda his fault. Let me explain. Hi, my name is Sebastian. You're watching Mistakes That Changed the World. In 1452, Emperor Constantine was still the ruler, albeit his empire was reduced to but a few islands and Constantinople. The city of those days was no more than a faded image of the great imperial capital that it had once been. Once a booming cosmopolitan metropolis of over 1 million people, the Constantinople of those times had no more than 50,000 residents. The army, once feared on 3 continents, that used to number tens of thousands of armored horsemen, was now made up of less than 7,000 men, including mercenaries. The massive and humbling walls, though, remained unchanged. The entire city was surrounded by at least one tall and thick wall, even in the coastal areas. On the more vulnerable eastern side, Constantinople was defended by double walls, with a smaller outer wall 2 meters thick and 7.5 meters high, and an inner wall, or the Great Wall, 8 meters thick and 12 meters high. Between them was a 9-meter deep moat. Inside each wall there was a road to allow rapid and sheltered movement, and access was possible only through small gates. The eastern wall had the most gates, often more majestic than the wall itself. At the foot of these walls lied Mehmed II, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who already ruled over the entire Middle East and parts of Africa, what were once Byzantine territories. Mehmed wanted to expand his control into Europe, but as it had done for over 1,000 years, Constantinople stood in his way. The Sultan gathered an army and built a fort Damascus crossing to Europe in the vicinity of the city, but there was no doubt about his intentions and no way for the city and Emperor Constantine to avoid a siege. Hoping for a rescue, Constantine asked for the help of all Christendom, but received very few answers. The kings of France and England sent nothing. The Pope did respond, but he asked that the Eastern Church recognize his authority. This was a difficult claim to bear for the other center of the Christian faith. Even so, out of desperation, the Byzantine emperor agreed. All in vain, though, because in return the Pope sent only 200 archers. The only reinforcement in the true sense of the word that arrived on time was a mercenary, an expert in wall defense. The mercenary brought with him 700 skilled soldiers. But as people continued to pour into the city, by the end of the year the garrison's strength had grown to 10,000 soldiers. On the other side of the strait, Mehmed was waiting with almost 100,000 men, most of whom were mobilized from all corners of his vast empire. There was another group of mercenaries that responded to the Byzantine emperor's call for help. In 1452, gunpowder weapons were just beginning to change warfare. But this was still a tricky business. Cannons were large, dangerous to handle, and often had a mind of their own. Gunners often made their own gunpowder and, just as often, cast their own cannons. They were well-paid civilian specialists because of their talent and the risks they took. Among the best mercenary gunners of those times was a man named Orban from the Kingdom of Hungary. Hungary was a Christian kingdom, so before the siege, Orban offered his men and cannons to Constantine XI. His cannons ranged from small ones that fired stone or metal balls of just a few kilograms to the one he called the basilic, which could only fire 7 times a day but threw shells that weighed up to 270 kilograms. Now, if the power of Constantinople laid in its walls, you would think that the emperor would understand that cannons meant the most serious threat against these walls. But, unfortunately, Constantine decided that the mercenaries and their cannons were too expensive. This in spite of the fact that there was a good chance that Orban would offer his services to Mehmed. So Constantine refused him, and unsurprisingly, within months, Mehmed hired Orban's troops and his basilic to help him attack Constantinople. The gunsmith accepted the Sultan's offer, which to be fair was the logical thing to do. He did give the Byzantines priority, but business is business after all. So instead of defending one of Christianity's most important cities, his cannons would instead bring down its walls. By the end of spring in 1452, the Turks had completed the fort that was to hide their army during the crossing of the Bosphorus. By the next spring, Mehmed was ready to besiege mighty Constantinople. On April 6th, every cannon in the Muslim army began to bombard the city walls. Most of them were cannons brought by Orban from Hungary. After 12 long days of sustained bombardment, a narrow breach appeared in the wall. The walls that had stood for millennia had been breached by the very cannons that Emperor Constantine refused. Hundreds of Ottomans attacked the small breach but were easily repelled. 1 month later, the cannons created another breach where the Lycus River entered the city through the eastern wall. Seizing the opportunity, the next day the Sultan threw 25,000 men into an attack, but amazingly they were repelled after just 3 hours of intense fighting. The Byzantine soldiers did everything they could to repair the damage, but from that moment on they were forced to keep people near the weakened sections of the wall at all times. 6 days later, yet another breach was created near the northern end of the Great Wall. The attack on that breach almost led to the Turks penetrating the city. Only the rapid reinforcements of Constantine and the Imperial Guard saved Constantinople. The siege continued for weeks, with the brave defenders repelling the Ottomans' attempts to use siege towers and dig tunnels under the walls. Meanwhile, the cannons continued their attack on the walls, trying to create new breaches and reopen those that had been repaired. So far, although under heavy attack, Constantinople was still standing. After the loss of the last siege tower, some of the Sultan's generals began to ask him to retreat. Others, however, encouraged him to try again. If the general assault failed, they would withdraw. On May 29th, Mehmed II committed all of his forces to a final assault. Nearly 20,000 Bashi bazooks, soldiers fighting for loot, attacked first. They were repelled, but immediately behind them came a second line of Ottomans who resumed the attack on the weakened wall. They pressed the partially blocked breaches, but were again repelled after just 2 hours of intense fighting. The defenders, though, were exhausted, and the Great Wall offered less and less protection. But before they could catch their breath, yet another third wave of Turks attacked. However, gathering their last ounces of energy, the Christian defenders repelled them again. Unfortunately for the city, while almost every soldier available fought near the breach by the Lycus River in the center of the Great Wall, a few Turkish soldiers managed to enter through a small gate that had been left open elsewhere. They took control of a small tower at the northern end of the wall and raised the Sultan's flag at the top of it. Although in reality it was a minor threat, this seemed to the defenders of the wall a disaster. Their morale and determination collapsed as more and more people learned of the flag on the northern tower. Then the commander of a large group of mercenaries was wounded and had to be transported away from the wall. The exhausted man of Constantinople who fought bravely up until this point lost all hope. For Mehmed, it was now or never. The Sultan sent in his elite troops, the Janissaries, who managed to take control of the eastern section of the wall from Lycus to the gate of Adrianople. After the Janissaries broke in, tens of thousands of Turks invaded Constantinople. Constantine XI, the last emperor of Byzantium, died fighting in the streets. The Ottomans were victorious and Constantinople fell, but this victory almost didn't happen. Under pressure from his generals, if the last attack had failed, Mehmed would have left. If the Byzantine emperor had hired Orban with his cannons, the breaches that weakened the wall would never have existed. Without those breaches, the Sultan's army would have found that attacking the Byzantine walls was an almost impossible task. One effect of the fall of Constantinople on Europe was a surprising one. The monopoly prices subsequently demanded by Turkish merchants for products and spices from the East led Westerners to seek alternatives to trade with Asia. Within 30 years, the Portuguese were sailing around Africa, and just over 40 years later, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain financed the first expedition of Christopher Columbus. The mistake of Constantine XI to not hire Orban condemned Constantinople and brought about the end of the last remnants of the Roman Empire. But it also forced the beginning of the most important period of discoveries ever known. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. I do hope to see you next time. Bye.